So what we've seen with our children's brain development is that they've got a shaky foundation. So that very from being in the womb, there's been an effect on the brain development. So any development that we are doing with our parenting is probably going on a shaky foundation. And our children have probably developed very strong survival skills. So it's not that their brain hasn't developed, it's just it's developed in a different way and it's developed for survival. And unfortunately, there isn't a reset button where we can say, it's okay, you don't need those survival skills anymore because we are going to look after you. You know, you can concentrate on this other stuff. It's wired in, you know, it's like an operating system in a computer. We've got to go with that. But because the brain's quite plastic, we can help set up new pathways. And that's one of the things that we're doing with our therapeutic parenting, is trying to set up new pathways. If we're dealing with children who've been exposed to alcohol in the womb, then that can cause actual brain damage, so organic damage. So then we're kind of thinking of alternative pathways kind of around the damaged bit. And we're doing it in the context of relationships. So the thing about therapeutic parenting is that it's very much about forming and maintaining and building relationships, because that's what should have happened at those earlier stages. You know, their development would have happened in the context of a relationship. So above anything else, it's keeping relationships going with our children and developing those, because that's the bit that we really need to get right, because that's our foundation for parenting. So if we look, first of all, then, sounds like quite a simple question. So what is therapeutic parenting? If we were just going to give a very quick summary, I like Sarah Nasher's summary. And I'll be referring to her books later on, so you can see it's a funny spelling. But she describes it as being a deeply nurturing parenting style with a strong foundation in empathic responding. So these are the factors that I'm going to focus on in my chat. And so it's, you know, it's just starting to be used more and more for children who've had traumatic early experiences. So foster carers, kinship carers, adoptive parents, and in birth families as well. The good thing about it is that it works for all children. So if you've got a mixed family, you might be like one of my colleagues who's a birth parent, a kinship carer, a foster carer, and an adoptive parent. It's like she wants to tick every box, but she does the same style for all of her children. So what we have with therapeutic parenting is that it's very structured. We have very strong routines, and we're in the back of our mind, we're responding to our children in the context of what's happened to them, and with an aim to helping them to recover from that. And that's where the therapeutic part comes in. Now, the good news is that you don't need to go on like a 3-year degree course or anything like that. You don't need to be a psychologist or a therapist or have analogy, as he used to say. This is that date to me. Or actually even any parenting experience to be able to do therapeutic parenting. So sometimes it's helpful to come to it with a clean slate. What you do need probably is to be quite resilient for yourself. It helps if you're quite curious about why people do the things they do. You know, you've got that interest in people. You do need to be able to take on board new ideas. And that's sometimes the thing that's hard, to stop doing things the way you have been doing them and do them in a different way. And, you know, you also have to be, I suppose, strong enough to be prepared to do things differently from other people that might be around you. So like family, friends, or even the way that you've done it before. Probably is important to say, I don't have a magic wand and it's not a quick fix. So I can't say, oh, it's simple, like Super Nanny with a blooming naughty step. You know, you just need to do this and it'll be fine. I'm afraid it isn't like that. It really is a way of life. So It's not something that you can just do in, for a couple of hours a day. It's not like physiotherapy exercises, or it's just something that you do at weekends, what have you. You just have to do it all the time. But it doesn't matter what stage you're at. So we've got a wide range of ages, in our children here, and they've been with us for different lengths of time, and it doesn't matter. Obviously, the sooner you start, the better for your child and for you. But it doesn't matter if you're starting after a year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. It's never too late. Fortunately, the brain just keeps developing. So let's get into some nitty gritty and have a little look at some of the features then, how we actually go about parenting therapeutically. Okay. So first thing is that there is structure. So therapeutic parenting is not a hippie, let it all hang out, do what you feel, go with your gut sort of parenting, right? It's not like that at all. It's very structured. But the structure is not to punish children, to catch them out. The structure is there to be very predictable, because that makes our children feel safe, and then they have less of a need to try and control things. So a lot of our children will have, people have said about them, oh, they're really controlling, they're very manipulative, they say labels like that. Well, remember, that's because they don't trust adults. So they feel to keep themselves safe, they need to be in control. They need to know everything that's going on, and they need to make sure that you do the things that they want you to do, because otherwise they're going to die. That's actually what's going on in their head. But if you can keep things following really strong routines, clear routines, so life is very predictable, then that removes that need for them, because they know what's going to happen. I was saying with my kids with meals, it's like, yeah, this is how it is. And you know what? Here's a box of food for each of you in the fridge. You can go and get food out of that anytime you like. You don't have to ask me. You just go and help yourself. That's fine. And it takes away that need to control. Whereas I remember in my prep group, we had that as like a case study, or what would you do if your child was stealing food, taking food out the kitchen, and I was like, oh well, I'd have a clock, and I'd say, oh, this is the meal time, and keep it very regimented. And then it's like, well, no, actually what you need to do is completely the other way around. It's like, here's all the food, you can eat really any time you like of these foods. It was just a different way around, not trying to control the child, but just addressing their need to know that there's plenty of food and that you're going to get fed. And so it's kind of like, okay, we've had breakfast, this is the next meal. It will be snack time. It will be out, when they could tell the time, I could say a time. Otherwise, it will be, when we've done that, when we've done such and such, then it will be snack time. So it's that sort of thing, having really strong routines and really clear boundaries. So this is partly for you, and for us as parents, so we're not having to kind of think all the time, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? It's kind of like, just have a very clear boundary about what's happening. Again, it's not to be punitive. It's not to give ourselves a reason to punish the children. It's to help them to feel safe. The thing with boundaries is you can expect them to get a good kicking, okay? Because children will want to make sure that those boundaries are really strong and safe. So, you think about, what do we need to do to keep everybody safe? Try not to have boundaries that are about things that just annoy you. Try to keep your clear boundaries for the things that keep everybody safe. That's our key thing. I realised when I started reflecting on my own parenting, how often I said no to my children. So I tried to change the switch in my head to say yes. Try and avoid saying no unless there was a really good reason for saying no. It's kind of like, is it life-threatening? That was my first thing. Is it life-threatening? Yes. Well, then that will be a no. But otherwise, it's probably going to be yes, unless there's a really good reason, or it might be yes, but not now. So think about that. So strong routines, clear boundaries with the aim of being really predictable. This is why we want to have our routines and boundaries. So it's really predictable for children, and so that you're not having to make everything up as you go along, so that you're quite clear about what you want to try and do. The trouble with this is, and this is why I've got this picture, is my giddy aunt, it's boring. Okay, it's really boring because you have to do the same thing all the time in the same way, and that is a bit mind-numbing, especially when you have to do it in the holidays as well. So in school you do kind of have a routine, don't you? Well, I know obviously the last year and a half it's been kind of less routine, but you know, school does impose a kind of routine on you, and in the holidays the temptation is to let it all hang out. Now your children might be able to cope with that, and that's great. Mine couldn't, and holidays were a total nightmare. I was like, oh, please let the holidays be over. Go back to school. Because basically I had to have a structure. We had to have a visual timetable of what's happening today. Because we couldn't just let it all hang out. Or if we did, it kind of, you know, it had to be structured. So it is boring. It's hard work for adults, but actually it pays off because they feel safe. And as they get older, they learn to create that structure for themselves. And they know that that makes them feel safe. You probably want to not, well, Sarah Naish, my guru on therapeutic parenting, says avoid the S word, no surprises. Because what we think of as surprises is a threat to our children. Because a surprise, there's a change, and there could be a change with not very much time to get your head around it. That's, you know, change is a signal for danger for our children. So their stress hormone levels will go up, and then that can lead to them what we call dysregulation. Excuse me, Angela, that is so cute. I'm sorry, I'm distracted. Look at that. That's so cute. Sorry. Focus. So even though it's a good, you know, it's a good surprise, it's a nice thing that's going to happen, that can be as hard for our children to cope with as bad things. So surprises, treats, you know, the big build up to the big treat, I should say that that's probably something that your children might find really difficult. So that can make life a bit boring. You think you're trying to do a big treat. I don't know if you've had this experience, but you know, you've tried to do something really nice, and thinking about a family that I was working with during lockdown, and when it snowed, and it's like, oh, we're going to do the sledging, you know, we're going to go out and we're going to have lovely family time, and the sledging and the hot chocolate, and her kids sabotaged it. And she was like, I just wanted to have a really nice family time. It's like, it's too much, too much excitement. You just couldn't cope. And it's like the safety valve goes. It's not to say you can't go sledging, but you know, not the big build up, you know, not an hour and a half to drive to where you're going to sled. Do you know, just go down the hill in your road or something. Keep it low key. Dan Hughes, who is another sort of fairly famous person in these circles, he said, fly a kite. He said, that's good. Disney World, don't go there. It's like that's the, you know, that can be the worst thing. I've never been to Disney World, maybe because I'd rather have my brain extracted through my ears, but it can be too much. But you know your children, you know what they can cope with, but to just be aware that surprises, treats, presents under the Christmas tree, these sorts of anticipation things, that can be really hard for them to handle, because they don't know that those presents are still going to be there on Christmas Day if you put them under the tree beforehand. They don't know that this is going to be a nice thing that you're doing with them when you go off in the car somewhere. It could be a bad thing. So you just kind of, you have to have the empathy to think about what's it like to be them. For for our children as well, there's often that feeling of that they don't deserve nice things, or they feel guilty about doing nice things with you. They feel disloyal to the birth parents. It's all very complicated. So we need to be a bit detective as well. And when we see them kicking off on something, I think, right, well, I wonder what's going on. It's not that they're bad. It's not that they're naughty. It's like what is triggering that fight, flight, fear response? Because the big kickoff, that's really a fighting response. It's a fear response. Okay, so Mr. Boring, that's what we need to be. So lots of structure, because structure means safety. Lots of nurture. So really look for opportunities to nurture, to build up, to repair. Sometimes I feel like we're always looking to catch our children out, but almost looking for opportunities to say no to them. When maybe you're a lot nicer than me, but I thought, oh my goodness, I'm really quick at picking up negative things. I'm not so quick at picking up positive things. So it's not about overpraising, because that can be quite hard for them as well. But it's just looking for opportunities to put in some nurture. The opportunity, often food is a big thing, because that's the first kind of nurture thing, isn't it? So it's looking for opportunities to give them the food that they really like, as not a big thing. Oh, I've done this amazing treat for you, what have you. You just give it them because they're worth it. I mean, that's a stupid advert, isn't it? But they're worth it. Make them their favorite meal for no reason. Look for opportunities to be kind to them. Look for opportunities to nurture them. Think younger. Think, what would I do with a little child? Is there a way I can do that with my slightly older child? So just look for opportunities. We used to do we went and had some training in therapy, and one of the things we found worked well for us was to all sit on the same sofa when we were finding something that we would all agree to watch on TV, all sitting on the sofa, all under the duvet, and that was just actually quite a nurturing experience. And my kids did that until they were like 13 or 14. I don't think they would do it now. Probably not sure we'd all fit on the sofa now, but just be on the lookout for those situations where you can create that nurture. We're looking to build them up all the time, and this needs you to really use your emotional brain. So your brain's like their brain as well. You've got your instinctive brain, you've got your emotional brain, and you've got your rational brain. Your instinctive brain will be triggered by things. So you kind of need to work out what presses my buttons. What is it that presses my buttons? And sometimes you have to make a conscious decision. I'm not going to let that press my buttons anymore. I'm going to take a step to the side and just let that go. Because actually, that presses my buttons because it was what my mum used to tell me off for. It can be really silly. Or that presses my buttons because people put at me when my child does that. So think about that. But the emotional brain, you really have got to use your emotional brain to look for ways to connect with your child and looking for opportunities. If they're the sort of child that's very kind of quite standoffish, which one of mine was, couldn't touch, look for ways to touch without touching. You could get, sometimes you feel stupid doing this stuff, I'll just warn you now, but you get a teddy and you cuddle it and you say, this is the hug that I'm giving you in my mind. I know you don't want me to touch you don't like that, so that's fine, but this is the hug that I'm giving you in my mind. Or a little finger touch, or just a little touch on the shoulder, which is taking those opportunities. We used to do finger hugs and little finger hugs. That was the one that wasn't stuck to my leg, so I had one stuck to my leg and one that I couldn't touch. It's like, okay, this is really interesting. Okay, so mentalisation, big word. Oh no, sorry. Was I still on self-awareness? Yes, I was still on self-awareness. So Where was I? Yeah, so I was talking about emotional brain, and also we need to use our thinking brain, right? We've got to think cognitively about, what's actually going on. For our children, that's really difficult. Their cognitive brain, that rational brain, is still developing. We know it's building on a shaky foundation. And of course, when they're stressed, the instinctive brain is in control, and that actually shuts off access to the emotional and rational brain. We can't afford to do that. Okay, we've really got to be the grown-ups, and we have got to override those feelings we're getting from our instinctive brain with our emotional brain and our rational brain. We've got to be able to think and not just react in the moment. And that's tough, and it takes practice. It really does take practice. So that's what I was saying, thinking about, well, what are the triggers? Why is that behavior important to me? If there's something that you're struggling with, is it really important or not? And you have to ask that question. And then think about what you're modeling in your behavior. What are you showing is important and what's less important? I realized when I was reflecting on my own parenting that my children probably thought that tidy bedrooms was the most important thing, because that was the thing I seemed to be mostly telling them off about. But of course, actually, it's not the most important thing. So my advice on the tidy bedroom front is give up. Just get in there and tidy it with them. It's really seriously not worth the effort. But use it as a nurturing opportunity. Go in there. It's like, oh dear, bedroom's getting a bit out of hand. Let's go and sort that out, and then we'll have a nice hot chocolate together. But go in there, do it with them after we chat. Use it as an opportunity rather than a shouting opportunity. But just think about what your model is. And I realized I used to tell my son off for wandering around with a bowl of cereal, getting ready for school. And then I realized that's what I do. So quite often I realized, and I started looking, I thought, oh, flipping it, he's just copying what I do. So I need to change my behavior. And the easiest one to think about for that is, what do you do with your phone? Right? For those of you with teenagers, and we're thinking about good habits with technology, look at your habits with technology. What are you modeling? Because they learn so much more from what you do than what you say. So just take a step back, or if you're living with somebody, ask them to give you some feedback, because we often demand higher standards from children than we do from adults, and that's really wrong. I remember again in my prep groups, we were asked, how do you express anger? How do you express it when you're angry? And I'm like, well, yeah, I do. I'm a bit shouty. I do swear. And I am definitely a stomper. I stomp about. And it's like, well, would you let your child do that? I'm like, no way. I'm like, there's a thought. So we're allowed to express anger, but children aren't allowed to express anger. Well, let's think about that. So let's actively teach our children what to do when they feel angry and find acceptable ways of doing it. And I need to demonstrate that. So you might be out in the backyard doing some star jumps. Those of you who are still capable of doing star jumps. I was doing a Joe Wick the other day and I thought, oh, I don't remember star jumps being this hard when I was a teenager. Oh my goodness. But anyway, whatever it is that you do to regulate anger, pick a good thing and teach the kids. So my one, that was the kicky offy one, learned to play the drums. That was quite good. Now goes off for walks, just long walks, and knows when they're stressed, that's what they do. So there is a lot here. We're thinking it's about children, but actually, it's an awful lot about us. And actually, what are we modeling? And sometimes you have to provide that narrative to say, mum, gran, auntie, or, me, I'm, gosh, I'm feeling so angry about, name whatever it is. I'm just going to have to shout, or I'm going to have to go and jump up and down in the garden. Think about, and just sometimes you actually get my words out, narrate that for them, actively teach it and point out that this is what you're doing. Or, I'm feeling really sad today because, I've had some bad news or somebody's upset me or what have you. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to go and have a hot bath. I'm going to read my favorite book. You're giving them strategies. You're teaching them strategies, because for them, it's difficult to know what they're feeling. They have to learn to recognize their own emotions, and then they can learn to do something about them rather than just going into the automatic responses. So there's a lot of this mentalization, it's hard work. This is not an easy option, therapeutic parenting. So this is what I say, it's not a hippie, let it all hang out. It's hard work, right? It's quite brain straining, because you're having to think about not only what's going on for the child, but what's going on in you and your partner or teachers. Think about what's underlying their behaviour and what's underlying our response to that behaviour, so that we can work out what's going on. This is not making excuses for children and saying, oh, well, it does that because he had a tough start in life. It's not an excuse. It's an active process of saying, well, the reason why, my child locks himself in the stationery cupboard at school, for some reason that sticks in my mind. Well, it's because a stranger was coming into the school that day. So obviously it did safe, because who knows what that stranger might be. So we need to unpick their behaviour and try and work out what's going on, and then we can think about how to deal with it, because it's so you can deal with that better rather than just saying, oh, we're all going down to the hall to meet the famous author now. It wasn't J.K. Rowling, I'm pleased to say. I can't remember who it was, due to trying to extract my child from the stationery cupboard. Okay, so that's what I mean by mentalization. So thinking about what's going on, and then allowing us to be responsive. So rather than reacting in the moment to what's going on, we're thinking about things and we're responding to the need. So if you do have you have a massive kickoff, you have a massive argument, or there's a meltdown, or your child's barricaded themselves in their room, or whatever the situation is, when everybody's calm, you go back over it and think about, so what was happening in that situation? What was happening before it happened? What actually happened at the time? How was everybody feeling? What did that actually feel like in the body? What did we do? Was that helpful? Did that actually make it worse? And it's just being quite every one of these times when things are difficult, that's a learning opportunity to try and work out what's going on and how that child's brain and body is wired up. And then you can think about it, how will I respond the next time? Am I going to respond differently? Could I actually have headed that off? Did that all go pear-shaped because I was talking too much, or I was trying to rush child out the door, I hadn't actually left enough time, or whatever, to work out what was going on, think, what do I do differently the next time? It's always changing, because of course your children don't stay still at the stage that they're at. So probably you'll find, just as you're getting the hang of a stage, of course they'll move on to the next stage, and you have to keep learning all the time. So it is quite hard work, but you want to try and be as consistent and empathic and insightful as you can. Okay. So the bit about we're trying to help children recover from essentially the damage that's been done to them, the trauma that's been done to them. And I will I'll give you some references at the end, and suggestions about YouTube and books and things. But I will say I'm just taking this all from Sarah Nasher's quick guide to therapeutic parenting, for those of us who don't have a lot of time for reading. Yes. Just with my own thoughts thrown in as well. So when we're trying to help our children to recover, so it's not just about us surviving in the moment, but it's about helping our child to recover. So one of the things we make more use of is using natural consequences rather than punitive consequences. So a punitive consequence is, you let me think. So, you didn't. Uh, I'm trying trying to think of something now. Okay, you wouldn't get up for school, so we were late for school. So you're not gonna get your computer tonight. No. So I would say that that's probably a punitive consequence. So the consequence is not linked to what actually happened. A natural consequence is something that helps children to link cause and effect. So one of the effects of having that sort of disorganized brain development is it's very difficult for our children to link cause and effect. And you might have noticed that in your children. It's part of that learning from experience, but they're not able to link those two things together. And so this makes life really difficult for them to understand. So when they get put on the cloud at school or the red traffic light or what have you, you think if you can't understand how cause and effect are linked together, to you as that child, that just looks completely random. It's like, I was put on the cloud. Well, I don't know why I was put on the cloud. But the other children probably have a better grasp of cause and effect, and so that will make sense to them. So we tend to use natural consequences to try and build up that cause and effect. So for example, if the throw a wobbly and they just throw everything about the room. Okay, so something quite mild, really. So kind of natural consequence is, well, we can't go and do anything else until we've tidied this up. So you're going to help me just tidy the room, put everything back together. Or if they break something, it's like, well, that's, everybody's really sad that you threw that thing at the TV and the TV's broken. It's like, well, we can't have, we're not able to watch any TV now until the TV's fixed. That's a natural consequence. It's not and you're going to go to bed at 6 o'clock every night because you broke the TV. No, it's just like, that's really sad. You're not getting to watch your favorite program. Nobody's getting to watch the programs until we're able to fix things. If we give a punishment that's not linked to what happened, they're not learning anything. They're not creating any cause and effect. It's just adding to their kind of experience of adults being mean, adults being horrid. And sometimes, punitive consequences can be traumatic. We're heaping trauma on top of trauma, and it can also escalate ridiculously. And I think, my husband and I realized I think we had grounded our son for like the next 50 years, pretty much. It's like, this is the point at which you start to think, I think we need to do something differently here, because this is really not working. And I remember my sister saying, well, I've let my kids have computer games, or play a Game Boy, I think it was at that time. She said, it's just so I can take it off them as a punishment because I'm running out of things to do when they're naughty. I'm like, yeah. But that's the sort of mentality you get into. Okay, so I'm sure we've all shouted ridiculous things. And if you do, in the moment, do you know what? Go back over it later on and say, of course, I didn't really mean that, whatever bad thing it was that you said. I was angry and I shouldn't have said that. Because the thing about the natural consequences is it does provide us with an opportunity to, to perhaps to be doing something with the child to fix what's happened and to explore what's happened, and recreate some brain wiring. Basically, punishment just creates shame and resentment. And think about it from an adult's point of view. If you've screwed up at work, if you've done something at work, how does it work for you? If you're punished, say your pay gets docked or you're demoted or something like that. Yeah, how does that make you feel? Well, but if your boss says, "Oh, well, yeah, thank that is the problem, but how are we going to fix that? How are we going to get around that? How can we give you some more training so that isn't going to happen again? Or, are you really stressed at home? Is that why you've made a mistake? So think about how do we treat adults compared to how we treat children. It's really important to avoid shame, because we talk about a thing called toxic shame, where our children feel a lot of shame because they kind of get into a mentality where they think that the things that have happened to them are their fault, and they think that they are the mistake. So it's not that they've made mistakes or that adults make mistakes. They feel they're the mistake. They're a bad person. That's why these things happen to them. They see all the other children at school maybe, and they think, well, they must be good. Think, everything's fine for them. They just must be good, and I'm bad. So they tend to have a lot of shame. And so if we add more shame to that, it's just very destructive. It doesn't help. And sometimes, kind of flip side of that is if we praise them, sometimes that conflicts with the view that they have of themselves, and they can't cope with that either. So you might say, and it happens at school quite a lot, oh, it's a great piece of work, well done, that's a super piece of work, and kids rips it up. So that's just, it conflicts with their view of themselves. So if you notice that in your children, you might have to be careful about how you praise them. Be quite low key. You might need to issue an alert that you're going to give them a compliment. And literally, we did that in our house. We had compliment alerts. And say, all right, I'm just warning you, I'm going to say something nice. But also give very specific praise, especially for effort. That is actually more important than achievements. So they might have won a prize. Well, that's fantastic. But actually, the thing that's going to get them on in life is being able to stick at stuff, isn't it? So look for opportunities to praise effort and having a go. If you make too much of rewards, again, children might sabotage them because they think they're not worth it. So if you are having rewards, thanks, keep it quite low key. Don't make a big thing about it. I would avoid reward charts personally, because again, they rely on cause and effect thinking, and they don't really work for a lot of our children because they haven't got enough cause and effect thinking. They'll either just not understand them, or they'll sabotage them. Yeah, I just wouldn't do it. Find different ways of doing things. Time in versus time out. So when my kids were quite small, Dr. Tanya was all the go. House of the Tiny Tearaways. Don't know if anybody ever watched that when that was on. We used to have that on, we used to watch that on repeat. And that was quite good in some ways because they had, quite a lot of positive parenting, which was good. But it was the timeout thing that really we would not recommend for children who've had trauma. What they need is time in, because they've experienced time out. They've had separation from those key relationships for whatever reason. They need time in. They need that time in, like you have with a small child. They need you to help them regulate, to help them understand what's going on. So don't use time out as a punishment or what have you. Sometimes a child themselves might say or indicate that they need some time out, and that's different. They're taking themselves off to calm down, especially as they get older. They might be using that as a strategy. So we need to allow them to do that. And see, that presses my buttons. Kid walks off when you're having a go at them. That really lights my fire. But sometimes actually, you just need to let them do that, because you need to calm down and they need to calm down, and we'll allow them the time out. But particularly for younger children, I know I'm sitting in the room now where I remember putting my son in here, doing time out, holding on to the door handle on the other side as he removed the hinges on the inside. So it doesn't work for smart kids. So yeah, time in. Stage, not age. we're thinking, so age, the chronological age of your children, so how many years and months they are, but developmentally they might not be at that stage. So we talk about their developmental stage, their emotional stage. So sometimes if you look at their behaviour, you think, what age of child is that behaviour from? And so those of you who've already brought up children have got a bit of a head start here, because you think, so, oh, I remember my son or daughter doing that when they were 3. Here's my 10-year-old doing it. But if they're acting like a 3-year-old, that's where they are at that moment. And so you have to kind of address the behaviour as you would with a 3-year-old. So just think about that. Try and work at the developmental emotional stage that they're at, not the chronological age. The thing that's a bit complicated is that they might be older than their chronological age in some things. So, they might be really advanced at things like self-care or cooking or things like that they've had to do, or looking after siblings or something like that, and they might be older than their chronological age. So, you might be having to think about how to get them to act younger. But sometimes the behaviour, more often is at a younger developmental age, and we need to meet them at that age. So if you think that they're demonstrating some 3-year-old behaviour, there's not a lot of point in asking them, trying to ask them to reason. Actually, any point where they're kicking off, there's no point in trying to reason with them. Okay, because they're in instinctive brain mode. So just don't even go there. Wait until everybody's calm before you try and think about stuff. Try not to lecture. Dan Hughes says 10 seconds is the longest lecture you should give. It's really easy to get sucked into that, isn't it? But keep it really short. Find other ways of doing things. Sometimes it's easier to have these conversations when you're doing stuff. So find an activity you both like doing. Try and do that if you want to have a conversation. Or in the car. If you spend time in the car, on the bus, where you're sitting side by side, that lack of eye contact can be really helpful for having a in-depth conversation. So obviously it's a bit tricky in the car if you're the one that's driving, and you suddenly get this stuff coming from the back seat, but just be ready for it. And so insightful. So I talked about this in the previous one as well. So this mentalisation, recognizing what's going on with children. So looking that wee bit deeper, recognizing where their behavior is coming from. Is it a survival strategy? Is it, the age of a younger child? What are they telling you with that behavior? If they're stealing food, well, there's stuff going on about food. They're obviously not trusting that food's going to be there. So don't get too stressed about it. Just make sure that they know that food is available, that they can have food. It takes quite a long time for them to relax enough not to hoard or steal food. Questions all the time, that drives you mad, but it's just a way of keeping you engaged. They've worked out if they ask questions, you're more likely to respond. So they need your attention. So give them your attention. So think about what's going on. As adults, I think we quite quickly stick labels on children, but we need to just go a bit deeper and try and think about what's going on. Right, we're nearly at the end of this stage, and then I think it will be nearly lunchtime. Okay, so this is the last bit of how we're helping children to recover from trauma. So rather than just trying to make children do what we want them to do, we're trying to help them, and we're trying to help them form secure attachments to us as their carers, but to form good relationships with other people, and to kind of move up what we call the hierarchy of needs. So, you start off with getting your very basic needs met, and then you can move up into being interested in things and forming social relationships and all this kind of more advanced stuff. But we need to understand we've got to meet those basic needs, and the children have got to trust that those basic needs are being met before they can move on to that. We really need to help them understand their behavior. So that's why I love that video with the children on, they are explaining what's happening in their brains. And so we have to help our children to understand why they behave. And it's not, it's, with my kids, it's because I'm adopted, or it's because I live with my nan, or have you. No, it's deeper than that. Okay, that's not the problem. The problem is what's happened to them. And so we teach them to understand and to recognize what those feelings are and how they're going to deal with them, give them strategies for how to deal with that. So that they can then gradually learn how to self-regulate. But they can't learn that until we co-regulate. So we help them regulate, and we can't do that if we can't regulate. So number one is we've got to be able to regulate ourselves so that we're using our thinking and emotional brain, not our instinctive brain. And that takes quite a bit of practice to be able to do that. Then we can co-regulate them when they're going off on one. And then they will be able to learn to regulate themselves. But it starts with us. And that is really hard. So I've got just a few little analogies here, which are so a few little stories I'll just tell you, and then we'll have lunch, okay? I hope nobody's really scared of flying, because they're all related to planes. So sometimes we can see that therapeutic parenting is a bit like trying to keep the plane in the air and all the passengers happy. And here's kind of our children's lives in the context of an aeroplane. So you can imagine that our children were born on a plane, right? And the plane took off. That was really scary. They couldn't see who the pilot was. And actually, the pilot was really rubbish. There was lots of turbulence, lots of swooping and falling about. The children weren't strapped in, so they fell about and they got hurt. Sometimes the pilot couldn't be bothered to fly the plane, and there were some really horrendous crashes. But then one day they came to your plane. So now they live in your plane. And this is great. You are all really good pilots. You keep an eye on the passengers. You make sure they've done up their safety belts. You make sure that the meals go around regularly. You're sitting up the front, so you can see all the controls. You know where you're going. But of course, the children can't see where they're going. What they remember is the falling and the crashing and the swooping about. And so they keep trying to break into the cockpit to take over the plane, even though they don't actually know how to fly the plane. So one of the things we have to do as therapeutic parents is we've got to fly that plane a lot, and we've got to make a lot of really successful flights and successful landings and successful takeoffs before the children are able to relax and let us fly the plane for them. So that's like one analogy. So if we think our children are trying to be in control, that's kind of what's going on in their head. My other, sorry, I maybe just explain that a little bit more. So if you imagine for the children, the little children passengers, it's their instinctive brain that's ruling them, keeping them in a state of fear. Their emotional brain's telling them not to trust you, and their rational brain, that thinking brain, doesn't remember all of those safe flights that you've popped up already. Right? That's when you're scared, memories don't get laid down. So, and they're scared all the time. So we need to remember that and try not to get into control battles with them, because for them it's life and death. For us, it's not that important. And so it's very difficult to win a control battle with somebody who's fighting to the death. Just try and avoid them. I'll skip that one and come to this one's really about school. So I had a very interesting journey through education with my kids. It's kind of because of that I'm doing the job that I'm doing now. This is not what I've done for most of my career. So here's another plane. So imagine you're on the plane, and if you've got a flying phobia, I'm sorry, but you're on a plane. It's one of those long haul flights. It's all a bit boring. You're sitting doing your Sudoku, and then you hear the captain come on and say, "Ladies and gentlemen, we're sorry, we're going to have to make an emergency landing because there's a fire at the back of the plane. This is a very small fire at the back of the plane." So what do we do? Do we go carry on doing our Sudoku? Do we feel a bit anxious? Do up our safety belt? Get the emergency procedure card out of the seat pocket? Or just forget everything, feel completely panic stricken and just focus on trying to survive? I'm thinking you're probably going to do B or C. You're probably not going to do A. And I suppose one question is, how important is the Sudoku at this point? How important is it that you finish your Sudoku? So our plane makes an emergency landing, and you stand up and you want to get off as quickly as possible because you can see that fire at the back of the plane. But unfortunately, there's a little old lady, and I'm not being sexist or ageist here, I'm just reading the script, who's trying to get a thing out of the overhead locker. And you're just like, never mind that. You just gently and respectfully, you just push her out the way, and you get off the plane and down the slide, and you're standing at a safe distance, feeling all a bit, like shaky, but quite relieved. And the cabin steward comes up to you, and you think, oh, that's nice. He's going to ask me if I'm all right and say what I need to do next, what have you. But the steward says, he's quite cross, and he says, just now, when I was evacuating the plane, you pushed that lady out of the way. And I need you to sign this agreement to say that if that happens again, you're not going to behave that way. And so you're a bit kind of like, what? If you think I'm getting on a plane again, you must be mistaken. And then the steward gets out another bit of paper and he says, oh, here's your Sudoku. I thought you might want to finish it. Now that's bonkers, isn't it? Nobody would behave that way. But that's kind of like what school can be like for our kids. If you think that the plane is school and the Sudoku is schoolwork, and plane fire is anything that triggers our kids when they're at school. So a stranger coming into the room can cause those stress hormones to surge. If we, instead of little old lady, we have a classmate, and the cabin steward is the teacher. And so we're expecting our children to be calm when they can't be calm because they're awash with stress hormones. We're expecting them to behave rationally when they're really scared. And then we expect them to be able to remember what they've done and not do that again the next time. And that's bonkers, isn't it? We would not do that for adults. And so this is why it's really important as therapeutic parents and for teachers and other people coming in contact with our kids is to understand what's going on for them. And often, I think I used to get this from school, well, they're not scared, they're violent or angry or trashing the classroom, what have you. I said, yeah, that's how they act when they're scared. It looks like anger, but anger is primarily about fear. Right. So PLACE is an acronym. It stands for playful, loving, accepting, curious, and empathic. And this is a sort of a method pioneered by Dan Hughes, who's an American clinical psychologist, and he's well into his 70s now. But he was the kind of first kind of person talking about the sort of thing that I went to hear when my husband and I were sort of looking for a different way to go on with our children. And it really did completely change the way that we were interacting with our children. And I found him interesting because as a psychologist, he obviously went through a lot of training. And he was saying, he realized when he went into practice that there were some children he was just not able to help. He was doing all the things he'd been taught at university and college and everything, but it just wasn't working. And he was like, well, why is this? And he delved a bit deeper and sort of found out that the common experience was the early experiences that these children has. And so he, looked at all of the research and his own practice and worked out this way of helping adults who are caring for these children to develop an attitude that they need to be able to help their children. So it helps our mistrusting children to feel more secure, and it helps to facilitate the capacity for them to be able to love and to have empathy and to have fun, because that can be really difficult for our kids. It's not a strategy, it's not a behaviour management program, it's a way of helping us, it's a framework for us to help us to be therapeutic parents. And I will send out some more detailed notes out about it when I send out the slides. Okay, so I'll just go through each bit in turn and explain what it means. So playful is about trying to have a light-hearted attitude. I don't know if in your families it's like mine was, and that we got so negative. Everything just seemed to be really hard and down, and I could hardly get myself out of bed in the morning because I'd just had enough. But playful is about trying to cultivate a determinedly light-hearted attitude, and really to make use of more actions than words. We do, as a grown-ups, we tend to use a lot of words to communicate. Obviously, I have today, but children tend to communicate better with actions or pictures, visuals. So we try and think about ways that we can find alternatives to words. And even with teenagers, this can be helpful. So, for example, if you are wanting to praise your children, you've found an opportunity to give them some praise. So don't go on and on and on. Give a very few words, but do something daft. Have a pretend fanfare, a wolf whistle, a victory dance, one of these complicated arm gestures that the kids are into, what have you, but a family thing, so that you can celebrate it without overwhelming them with words. And look at ways to build up relationships, not by having lots of meetings and deep talks and things, but by sharing time together, doing things that the children like doing, and particularly things that the children are good at. Try and identify those things. This may involve you doing things that are really boring. If your children are really into Minecraft or whatever the latest thing is, right, you may have to feign interest. Or even, not necessarily you have to feign interest, but you can say, oh, that's really great that you're interested in that. I can see that you're getting really good at that. Why, tell me a bit about it. You don't have to sit with them the whole time, but spend a bit of time alongside them, sharing the thing that they like doing. Things like theraplay, if you've come about that. So that's learning techniques of playing with your children, but in a therapeutic way. And we found that useful. We had some basic theraplay training. And kids must have been just about getting to the teenage years. And again, it was still useful to find wee things that we could do together. We want to try and cultivate situations where we can laugh together, laughing in a good way, because laughing itself releases a hormone called oxytocin, which is, I call it the happy hormone. It's a happy hormone, but it also counteracts some of the stress hormones. So it's kind of like you can't be stressed and laughing at the same time. So when the children are laughing, they're not feeling that shame that I was talking about before lunch, and it enables those higher levels of the brain to come online. So who knew that laughter was such an important thing? But try and look for opportunities to be daft. And again, this may involve you in a certain amount of ridiculous behavior. Okay, so just randomly doing stupid stuff, laughing at yourself. Not laughing at them, but laughing with them. When things go wrong, try and find a way to laugh at things. Okay, it's much easier for children to engage with adults who they share laughter and with. And if you can't laugh, then smile, because that's also really helpful. I think that remember, sorry, my door's really creaking. Behind me. Remember myself making a conscious effort to smile at my children in the morning. Now, I'm not a morning person, and my husband used to get up first. And by the time I got up, there'd probably been a certain amount of activity with the children. I could track them around the house by the trail of things that were left around. And, you know, by the time I sort of met them for the first time, I probably waded my way through a pile of stuff, and I was already in a bad mood because I always am in the morning. And then I was in even more bad mood. I consciously made a decision to leave it, smile, be pleased to see your children in the morning. You know, you probably are much better at this already, but for me, that was a difficult thing for me to remember, to smile and say hello, even if we finished yesterday on a really bad note, or I'm already annoyed by the state of the bathroom, or, you know, whatever. Smile, look pleased to see them, even if you're not. So just find these little opportunities to make that connection, to be pleased to see them, to be playful, find opportunities to be playful. And again, in some ways, it's like thinking about things that you do with very small children. And you can automatically are playful with very young children. And it's trying to keep that kind of attitude going as they get older. It's also a good opportunity for children to practice regulating their emotions while they're doing something they enjoy doing, because it's as difficult for them to regulate their emotions doing something they like doing as it is, you know, when it's a negative situation. But it's obviously a lot more pleasurable, so it's a good practice to help them to learn, because sometimes, as you know, when they're doing something fun, it can get out of control, you know, because they don't have any boundaries and they just go too far. So we need to practice that, but it's nicer practicing it doing something fun than it is, you know, through the negative things. So that will help. So that's P. P is for playful. L is for loving. And, you know, I know people go on and go, oh, you just need to love them. You are allowed to smack people who said that, by the way. It's definitely a law. But love isn't enough. You know, there's got to be all sorts of other things as well. But it is important that we are loving towards our children, that our love is not dependent on their behaviour. So they have to know that we love them at all times, not just when they're good, even when they're being horrendous. So we might need to demonstrate that to them. I remember one of my kids, as soon as something went wrong, you know, if there was a falling out, what have you, he would go and pack a bag. You know, because that was like, oh, obviously going to move now, it's falling apart. So, you know, that is a deep fear for them. We need to show them that, you know, we've all got lots of parts, you know, that was a, you know, I didn't like that behavior, I didn't like what you did, but I still love you, we're going to sort it out. And sometimes with some kids, they don't show, you know, you don't get anything back, and that's really hard when you don't get that love back. But we still have to go at their pace and show love, not necessarily by demanding hugs. If you've got a child that is kind of avoidant in that way, you can't force them, but you show them, you speak it, you demonstrate it in other ways. You have to be quite creative. We kind of have to teach them what love is, and so we need to try and, you know, keep ourselves regulated, as I was saying, so that we don't say horrible things. But, you know, if we do, then we take that opportunity to repair the relationship. So we're teaching them what love is by showing them love all the time, not just when they're good, but also when things go wrong. Again, it's this modeling thing. We show them how to repair, and we often forget to do this, and our kids are really bad. You know, they fall out with somebody, they pack their bags and they move on, you know, whether they do that physically or they do that mentally. But it's teaching them, like, well, you've fallen out with somebody, but, you know, here's the way back. and you have to model that. And quite often you have to model that by you saying you're sorry. So kind of like looking for opportunities to say, oh, I'm sorry I shouted at you. You know, I was really cross because of X, Y, Z, but I shouldn't have shouted at you. I'm sorry. You have to model that rather than demanding apologies from them. It's all about keeping that connection going. It's not one of my kids. But I thought I've seen that expression many, many times. My kids both have blue eyes. So accepting. This is kind of moving on from that loving to accepting the child as a person. We might not like their behavior, but they are not their behavior. Okay, that's their language that they're telling you what's going on. But we need to focus on the person. We don't like them. Oh, sorry, we do like them. We just don't like the behavior. It doesn't mean that we excuse the behavior. You know, we can have this sort of narrative where it's like, I know you're really upset, but you're not allowed to hurt people. You know, that's a boundary. We're not allowed to hurt people. So we need to find another way for you to behave when you feel like that. It takes time. You know, the behavior will not disappear overnight. Come back. But the behavior is not your fault. You know, it's not a response to your parenting. It's a response, or it's an effect of the trauma that they've experienced. So, you know, you may get the same sort of thing that I said, oh, it's because they're adopted, right? It's something you're doing wrong. Well, no, it's not what I was doing wrong. It's what happened to them with you. It's not because they're in kinship care placement, whatever variety, because of what has happened to them that means that they now are in this place. So we're trying to interpret the behavior to produce an intervention that's going to make a difference rather than just doing a one size fits all. Again, like, you know, super nanny with a naughty step. Doesn't matter what they do, she gets out the naughty step. That's not going to work for our children. Okay, we need to dig down and find out what's going on. I've mentioned cause and effect before, and I'm going to mention it again because it's really important. Because a lot of behaviour management programs, tools, what have you, depend on children being able to link cause and effect. And this is rational brain. Cause and effect is a rational brain behaviour. So, you know, if our children have got, you know, any rational brain development, it's not going to be great. If they can't make the connection, they can't change their behaviour. So we've got to be building those connections before we can be modifying the behaviour. We want to think about how we can be enabling for our children. So it's that kind of affirming, even though you push me away, I'm going to be here. I'm pleased to see you. Even though we're having a tough time, I'm still pleased to see you in the morning. I'm still pleased to see you after school. I still say good night to you at night. You know, make sure that you have these little routines. You always say hello to them in the morning. You always say good night to them at night. You know, even if you're ready, you know, have enough now. Take opportunities to connect. And you maybe find this more with teenagers. I gave up work when my children were teenagers, partly because I was working at Edinburgh College, well, it was Stevenson College then, and they amalgamated, and there was chance to take voluntary redundancy, and I took it because I wanted to be at home for those teenage years, because you've got to be ready to talk or to be with them when they want to be with you. You've got to be waiting for the opportunity, and when it comes along, you've got to take it, because you might not get another opportunity for a week. So, you know, that was, you know, I had that opportunity, and I took it, and did a bit of work from home. I was also getting very tired of trying to balance 3 different local authorities, because I was working in Edinburgh with Edinburgh Holidays. I had one child in a Falkirk school and one child in a West Lothian school, and all the holidays were at different times, and it was frying my brain. So, but that was enabling. I was able to do that, to be around for the times when the children were around and we could make a connection. I think the other thing about enabling is that, you know, whatever the children is communicating is valid for them. And so, can't say to them, well, you shouldn't feel like that, or you mustn't feel like that. Well, if they feel like that, that's how they feel. And that's where we got to go from. And there is always meaning in the behavior. That doesn't mean that it's not difficult to work out what's going on, but it changes how you see it when you see the behavior as a communication or a language, rather than just something they're doing to annoy you. And they might be doing it to annoy you, because they might know when you're annoyed with them, you are giving them really intense attention, and you're really engaging with them. So they might have worked out that's a really good way to get your 100% attention, is to do something that presses your buttons, because attention is all that they're bothered about in their survival strategy. It doesn't really matter if it's negative or positive. Actually, negative's often better because it's more intense. So it's all backwards in their world. So that was P for playful, L for loving, A for accepting, C is for being curious. This is one I struggled with. I probably found this the hardest to do. It's really what I've been speaking about, is rather than standing in judgment on their behaviour, it's about being curious about what's going on. So not just curious for ourselves, but teaching them to be curious about themselves. So we look for ways to listen and to hear what children are saying to us through the behaviour, or through, when they do speak. Also encouraging them to be curious, because we think about little children, we teach them that. We say, oh, how are you feeling today? Oh, you look a bit sad. Are you feeling sad today? We're teaching them, without realising it, to be curious and to link up how they're feeling. So our children, perhaps they've not had that experience. So we need to teach it more explicitly, encouraging them to reflect on why things have gone wrong, how they're feeling, what's happening, teaching them that they're worthy of being curious about. With Adoption UK, we've had an education panel with young people relating their experiences in school, and a really common theme that came out was the teachers that they connected with were the teachers who liked them and were curious about them and took the time to get to know them, even though they obviously were very hard work at school. And so that's really important for us to be bothered enough or curious enough to wonder what's going on. And sometimes you might have to a certain amount of acting is required in this place model, but acting, modeling thinking. So we need to be curious about them before they can be curious about themselves. So sometimes you might have to sort of model, oh right, I'm just I think I need to think about this. You've got to kind of ham it up and hope you're not in a public place. Thinking about, well, I wonder, are you getting so wound up today because, and have a guess. Have a guess about what it is. It doesn't matter if you're right or wrong, really. But you can say, well, I wonder if it's, if you're wound up about the spelling test on Friday, or are you getting a bit wound up because you're meeting with mum this week, or are you worried about you've seen something on TV that's reminded you about something. You can make a guess, and then if they come back with something, then you can be interested in that and go a bit deeper. You can sort of teach them empathy, which is going to be the next one, but by sort of pointing things out and pointing out people, and it's like, oh, that person looks a bit sad. I wonder why they're sad, and making up little stories about people, teaching them to see people as people with their own thoughts and different feelings to them. We kind of have to get into their world, but we've got to kind of teach them to look outside of their world. But when you're in survival mode, it's really difficult to be bothered about anybody else, as you know yourself, when you're really stressed. Okay, E is for empathy. As I said, so you can see these stages all kind of go one on from the other. But empathy takes that curiousness into putting ourselves in our children's shoes. So it's really tough being us, right? It's really tough being an adoptive parent. It's really tough being a kinship carer. It is tough, but it's tougher for them because we've got some choices and they don't have any choices at the end of the day. So try and keep some empathy, what it's like to be them, to walk in their shoes and find out what's going on. I can't remember who it is that says this now, but connect before correct. You know, before you trying to change your behavior, try and get a connection going, and the connection is the important thing. And as well as, you know, we're looking for the things that they find difficult, you know, we're kind of looking for, I suppose, in a way, negative things, but look for their strengths as well. You know, look for what they're good at, look for what their strengths are and build on that and remind them of, well, you know, do you remember last week, you know, you were anxious about blah blah, we did this and you managed really well. Because you have to remind them of their successes as well, because they'll forget those, as well as forgetting the fact that, you know, they were excluded from school yesterday because he spat at the teacher. They will bounce back into school the next day having no memory of that. Okay, which is frustrating for everybody. But they also won't remember the good things. So we have to remind them. We have to remind them. So find their strengths and build on those. You know, I think that some of the extracurricular things that my children were involved in have been really important for them in their building up their self-esteem and, you know, what they're doing now. Remembering that we're wired for relationships, that's how humans are. You know, that's kind of how we're designed, that's how we've evolved to be. Um, if if our basic needs are not met, we're kind of operating at a non-relationship level. You know, we are basically competing with everybody else for the scarce resources. And you can often see that in a children's behavior. It's a competitive thing. I'm going to survive. Once those needs are met consistently, then the brain's able to have a bit of spare capacity to start thinking about cooperation, which is relationships. And that's when we can start to help our children build relationships. And we will probably have to help them more with building relationships than other children that we know or we've experienced. So you can't just send them on a play date. I hate that term, by the way, play date. But anyway, I know it's the in term, but you can't send them on a play date and expect them to be okay. Right? You might have to go, or you might just have to invite one child round, or you know, you just will have to support them in doing relationships because they will find that difficult. And if you teach them nothing else, if you can teach them how to navigate human relationships, it's job done really. The rest will come, but relationships is the tough thing. Um, if we're empathetic with them, again, we're modeling being empathetic, and they will learn that from us. I've mentioned the co-regulation before, but I'll mention it again, about how we have to stay regulated in order to co-regulate them when they're finding their emotions overwhelming, and then eventually for them to self-regulate. So the key thing about place is it's an attitude. You know, it's helping us to develop this whole attitude, and that changes the way. Best way I can describe it in the way it happened for us was it changed the temperature in the home. It kind of reset how our home was, and it went from being a very negative, miserable place to be to somewhere that was a lot happier and lighter. And you know, it wasn't perfect, and it still isn't perfect. We're still up and down like a roller coaster, but that everybody's emotional temperature changed. So that's a useful thing about it. Well, there's like a quote. But you know, it's at a relationship level where things have gone wrong in our families, and it's only through relationships we can actually put things right. So that's just a wee reminder to keep the relationship going. Okay. So we're into our last half hour, which is good because that's about where I wanted to be. Right, I just want to pick out my next slides. Okay, so let's just have a little stock take on what therapeutic is and isn't, or it's like an is and an isn't. You see all sorts of stuff on Facebook, don't you, and YouTube and various other platforms that I don't engage with. So key things about therapeutic parenting is it's very nurturing. So the emphasis is all on nurture to develop relationships. As we've seen, it's very empathic. It's responsive rather than reactive, which means we're thinking about it and tuning our responses. And it's very structured. We're looking at helping our children to recover from trauma, and it's just the way that we live our lives, even into adulthood. As I say, my children 23, I'm still doing it. But it requires a lot of effort from parents. It's not a cop-out. So in your parenting, it's not a cop-out. You're going to need all of these things. You need to be resilient and curious and and in particular, able to keep your thinking and emotional brain online and not join the child in the rule of instinctive brain too often anyway. What isn't it? What isn't? It's not a quick fix. It's not one of these TV programs, like Super Nanny. I got it really in for Super Nanny, but I don't watch parenting programs anymore. So my knowledge of parenting programs stops about 10 years ago. So not a magic wand or quick fix for you just need to do this. And it isn't the child that's in charge. Sometimes it looks like that. Because, why aren't you telling them off for that? Why aren't you doing that? Well, we're just doing it differently. It's not that the child's in charge. It's just I know at the moment my child needs to run around like a mad thing. It's not that there aren't any boundaries. It's the other way. It's much more boundaried and structured than conventional parenting, because we probably would say no if somebody says off the cuff, would you like to come round after school, something like that. You might say, well, thanks very much for asking, but actually we need to stick to our routine, otherwise everybody gets really stressed. We need to plan for that sort of thing. It is not punitive. We don't punish our children. We look for ways to teach them the consequences of what they do, and this is really tough. And even in teenage years and younger adult years, it's really tough. And sometimes you have to let them do stuff to learn the consequences. That's really hard. Just working that one through. One of my kids at the moment. So it's not punishment. We're trying to create that wiring in the brain of learning from your experiences and joining up your cause and effect. Punishment only works because of fear, and our kids have had enough fear. Therapeutic parenting is not only for damaged children. It works really well for all children. Not all of my colleagues at Adoption UK are adopters. We have birth parent. I think we have every kind of parent, non-parent, and carer in amongst our team. And report back. No, actually, it works for all children. Really, we should be trying to teach. This would be a really useful thing to teach people at school, how to be a parent. Would be a good thing. Hey? It doesn't only work in young children. Brain is plastic for many years. It works at any stage. It works faster in young children because their brain is more plastic, but it works at any stage. You don't need to be an analogist or a psychiatrist or have previous parenting experience. In fact, sometimes that makes it harder. You've got more to unlearn. I'm going to be Yoda, unlearn what you have learned and do it differently. Is it a piece of cake? Well, once upon a time, Adoption UK had a parenting program that was called Piece of Cake. And it was a really good program, but a lot of people didn't like the name because it was not a piece of cake, or if it is, it's a very tough and chewy cake. But just sort of highlight why it can be difficult and why you might feel a bit discouraged. It's often people don't understand what you're doing because it looks different. Sometimes it might look like you're not acting when other people think you should be acting, or you're not acting in the way. School will be like, well, why aren't you punishing them for that? Well, apart from what happens in school, I think should be dealt with in school. That's another thing. Come on the education course. But sometimes people don't understand what we're trying to do. People say unhelpful things like, if you're concerned about a behaviour, and people say, all children do that. I think I'm going to have that on a t-shirt as the most annoying thing that people say to me. Yeah, well, children probably do have tantrums, but most children grow out of them when they're 2. They're not still doing it when they're 15. Right? Well, they don't do them with quite the level of intensity and commitment that our children do, or they don't do it 30 times a day like our children do. So obviously, I do not advocate violence in any shape or form, but you're allowed to smack people who say that. I'd soon sort him out. Oh, don't we love that one as well? Yeah, you should give him to me. I'd soon sort him out. I read this thing on the internet. You just need to do this. Okay, these are all annoying phrases that you have to learn to just let you flow over. Or I'm going to talk about self-care in a minute, but it's really good if you can find somebody that you can rant to when you have these sorts of conversations. Sometimes, and this is an issue with school, people say can't treat one child differently from the others. Of course they can. We do it all the time. They don't expect children in wheelchairs to climb stairs. If your child can't cope with lining up in the playground and waiting to go in, then they can't cope with that at the moment. We need to find a different way for them to get into school. So, lack of understanding, that's their problem, not yours. Timescales, it is slow. But I would expect that the kind of atmosphere in your house to change quite quickly, and kind of how you're feeling about it to change more quickly. But it's not a fix. It's not after you've done it for 6 months, your child will be fixed. It's just a way of parenting that's going to go on for as long as you are parenting, which, as we know, is basically forever. And you do get setbacks and you do get regressions, particularly at every transitional stage. But it's better than conventional parenting because you do make progress. And it's useful to just keep reminding yourself, well, actually 6 months ago, we couldn't get out the house without having the screaming abdabs. But now, actually, that's a rarity. Sometimes you forget how much progress you've made. People have unrealistic expectations. They might say things like, oh, but, gosh, he's been with you a long time, hasn't he? He's been with you 10 years. Didn't you have him as a baby? You've always been around. How come it's not sorted? Well, because it isn't, and it won't be. Also, of course, children grow up. So I think I said earlier that children are changing. They're developing all the time, and just as you get the hang of one stage, they move on to the next one. And so you just have to keep up with them. But of course, external expectations increase. So your child might be in some parts of their development still operating at a much younger age than their actual chronological age, but the expectations out there are higher. And this is particularly tough when they hit 18 and they leave children's services and go into adult services, and that transition is rubbish. There is no transition. If you've been involved with children's mental health services, there is no transition into adult mental health services. It's really difficult, but there's that expectation. Well, they're an adult now, and they're treated as adults, and you're like, well, yes, they are, but that doesn't mean that they're capable of handling all the things that adults are expected to be able to handle. So that's tough. It's exhausting. Yeah, it is. Well, parenting's exhausting, isn't it? Parenting, for those of you who are parenting at an older age, is exhausting. It's exhausting because you're having to work so hard. Your brain's having to work so hard to do, thinking about your behaviour, thinking about their behaviour, thinking about what you're doing, analysing stuff all the time. And helpful people might be saying, "Oh, just let it go, let's hang out, just let them be." And you're like, "Well, I can do that, but I know that I'll be paying for it later." So it is tiring. Even things that are very simple can be hard work in your house. Behaviours can be quite relentless. You have to stick to the routines. Self-regulating. It's just really tiring having to keep a lid on your emotions. So this is why I'm going to talk about self-care in a minute. And of course, your families are complicated, right? All of us, really, we've got extra complications in our families. So some of you, I guess, there's contact with birth parents, others there's not contact with siblings, your relationships with birth parents, for kinship carers, I think that's tougher than it is for adoptive parents, because you know all the people involved and you have to keep in relationships with them. So I think that's really tough and really complicated and really emotionally draining. And that's also a dynamic situation. So, I'm not selling it as an easy thing. So you might think, flipping it, why do it if it's that hard? But the thing is, it works an awful lot better than conventional parenting. You could be not doing all of these things and just really everything going to pot. So it does work, but it's not a quick fix. But it is really important. I think maybe some of you are coming on the connective parenting course that we're doing after the summer, which is kind of the next stage. We talk a lot about self-care on that course, because you do have to look after yourself. It's not a luxury. You need to have some boundaries about when you are going to look after your own needs. And we're often conditioned, and I think particularly for women, although not exclusively, to put everybody else's needs before your own. But actually, it's like the oxygen mask thing. You've got to put your mask on before you can see to other people. So if you fall apart, what's going to happen to the rest of the family? So you do need to look after yourselves. And also, if you're really stressed, it's much harder to do therapeutic parenting, because you're not getting access to that thinking and emotional part of your brain. So self-care is not a luxury. It's not the thing you do when everything else is done. It needs to be in your schedule, how you're going to look after yourself. If nothing else, it makes you a good role model, as you're showing your children that you're worthy of being looked after. So, you're worthy of it. And also you're teaching them that they are worthy of looking after themselves. So And again, you can do the narrative. I used to find when I wasn't working, when I had days off, I would try and do so many things while the children were at school, I would not have lunch. And then when I was picking them up, I was really grumpy because I hadn't had anything to eat. I was hungry, as they say. And I really had to force myself, stop. You need to take half an hour and have your lunch and read your book and take a wee bit of time out, and you'll be in much better state. So again, look at what's essential, look at what's, don't create rods for your own back. And honestly, what is this? This is name a cliche. But try and find some time to look after yourselves and do things that you like doing, even if it's for 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Find ways to look after yourself. Also, don't overlook the value of peer support. So peer support is people like you, people who also walk a similar journey to you. And I think this is what KCAS is really trying to promote, is putting people in touch with other people. And I'm really looking forward to when we can do some in-person stuff. I mean, Zoom is great. And, we've reached loads of people that normally we wouldn't be able to reach because of, geography. But nothing beats getting together and just having a natter and a chat. And they're like, oh my goodness, I'm not the only one that this is happening to. And I was very wary of this sort of stuff until I started getting involved with Adoption UK. And my kids started coming along to things, into family events and meeting other children like them. And they, as they got older and more articulate, they would say, it's great, I don't have to explain stuff to pals from Adoption UK because they get it. So that peer support is really important. So, look out for the stuff that KCAS is doing and don't be afraid to get involved in that. Think about your support network that you've got around you, and don't be afraid to ask for help or to ask for specific help. Think about how people can support you. Are there people who could cook you meals that you can put in your freezer? Are there people who come and cut your lawn or walk the dog, or who could pick kids up from school or do something that way? Sometimes people want to help, but they don't know what to do, what would actually be helpful. So think about your supporters and think about, well, actually, I think they could do that for me. Don't be frightened. You are doing a really important job by being kinship carers. And also you're saving the country oodles of money by taking on these children. So really don't feel ashamed of asking for help. But also you might identify amongst your circle some people who really are not helpful. And sometimes that's quite hard if they've been friends before and you realise that now actually whenever they call you think, oh no. Or they're the ones that say these unhelpful things. They think they're being helpful, but they're not. You just might have to quietly drop them. That sounds a bit harsh, but think about you need to be built up, and some people you just might have to gradually let them go. Or find, if you can have a tactful conversation to say, well, actually that's not really very helpful when you say that, but I find that really difficult. You might be more successful than me. I've mentioned about peer support for our children as well. So yeah, so as I say, take advantage of the training that's available with KCAS, not just because you're getting training information, but also there's opportunities just to spend a wee bit of time together and have wee chats, which is starting to build up some relationships. And then definitely when we start doing in-person stuff. But also, Jennifer, it's about the helpline. Let's start there. It's there Monday to Friday. So it's a helpline. It's not a don't call us until you're totally in crisis line. Okay. It's I just need a bit of help line. So it might be something practical, or it might just be, I just need to talk to somebody. I just need to offload today. or I just don't know what to do. I've lost my grasp of therapeutic parenting today. I just need to talk to somebody and go over it again. You know, I can't see how to do a natural consequence in this situation. Just ring them. And if they can't answer the question, they'll ask around the team. You know, we've got a team of about 25. We'll find somebody who can help you. Okay, so please don't make the helpline like the last ditch thing that you do when things are tough. Think, you know, I'll just call the helpline. If I can't think so, I'll just give them a shout. Be prepared to keep learning. So I've said KCAS are in position at the moment. They're able to offer lots of training and it's free, which is great. That might not be the case forever. So, you know, do as much as you can. And the thing is, you'll find because your children are growing up, you probably need to refresh your training every now and then. I reckon every year I needed to go to something and just get topped up because it kind of drains away under the pressures of life. But also we're learning new stuff all the time. So we're learning a lot about the importance of sensory development in children. And yeah, well, I know it's 1:45 and it's time for another kitty snack. Let's go away. So helpful. Very fluffy. So, you know, don't think, oh, I've done that training now, I don't need to do that again. It's fine. Keep coming back, especially while it's free. And have a look around on things like YouTube and Facebook, and there's lots of chat and lots of groups and things going on, and it just keeps you topped up and gives you ideas. And you can put in, I just don't know what to do. You often see this on Facebook. I just don't know what to do about this situation. And, you know, parents will come back and say, yeah, we had that. We tried this. This is really helpful. Oh, don't bother doing that. That was really useless. And, you know, there's this kind of community online, which is really helpful. I think it's always good to hold in our heads that really our children are doing the best they can. It's just that they've got this impact of trauma in their bodies and in their brains that means that often they can't do what we're asking them to do for whatever reason, whether that's at home or at school. And I think that's helpful to keep that in mind. I'm just going to pause because I see there's quite a lot of things in the chat and I don't know if those are questions. Jennifer, are there any questions in the chat for us to address?
We have, they've been sharing quite a lot in the chat, so thank you to everyone who's pitched in with some useful resources and links. I think Anne had mentioned about the webinars or YouTube videos that Suzanne Siddiq has made available, and then Debbie's helpfully shared the links to those. So that's it. It's really useful to find out about these resources and share them again. So that's all. There aren't any other direct questions.
Okay.
People are
fine. And I think somebody had also put in how you spell Sarah Naish, who's a person who I refer to quite a lot. She's written quite a lot of books. Put some up. Thank you for that. Is there any questions, Anne?
Yeah, thanks. Am I muted? No, I'm not.
No, I can hear you.
No, it was the laughter thing when you talked about the laughter, and I was reminded that this time last year the Kinship Care Forum, of which I'm a member, we organised for Suzanne. She came up with LOL, you know, the acronym LOL, so listening, organising and laughter, but it was the science of laughter. So when you started talking about laughter, I went straight back to remembering that. So that's the connection. And it really does work, doesn't it?
It's bizarre.
I know.
Yeah, but yeah, it does. And it helps you, of course, because if you're laughing, your stress hormones are being held at bay as well. So it's just, it changes the feeling, changes how you feel about it, which is the most important thing. Anything else folk want to ask? Elizabeth.
So I just wanted to ask, my granddaughter, we've experienced lots of what you've spoken about in her early years. She's nearly 16 now, so I could sort of remember a lot of the stuff. But when we talk about stuff, you know, that we've experienced together as our family, not her early years stuff, she'll often say, I don't remember that, I don't remember that. And I know you said, you know, they don't remember lots. Is it useful for us to remind her of that? You know, the good things. You know, like we've had good holidays where we have managed a holiday, or we've had a good celebration where we have managed it. Or is that just sort of imprinting in her brain stuff that she's forgotten and sort of not good to remember her?
Yeah. No, I think it is good to remember, especially the good stuff.
Yeah.
Yes. And they might remember if you sort of say, well, do you remember, if you can remember sort of things about it that you think they might latch onto. So like she's really into horses or something. You remember we saw that lovely horse, or, you know, like you do with little kids. Like say, if you say, oh, do you remember Mrs. So-and-so? They won't. We say, she's the lady with the spotty dog. Oh, yes, I remember. I remember her. So, yeah, I would. And if you've got, you know, photos and things, go back and say, oh, look. Yeah, no, that's really good. Look how happy everybody looks. Or remember, we all felt really, you know, name the emotions.
Yeah.
But,
I was just a bit worried that we were almost reminding her that she had forgotten, and if that was more damaging or not. But
I don't think so.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, keep doing it as part of your family story.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. No, thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah. Anything else, folks? No. Yeah, Angela, we've got your hand going up. Yeah.
I just wanted to go back to what you at the beginning.
Sorry, Angela, can you move a bit closer to your mic? Really quiet.
Is that better?
No, you're still a bit quiet. Just shout.
I just want to go back to the beginning when we spoke about the 3 parts of the brain, and obviously our situation as I was thinking about the instinctive part where you were talking about it connects to digestion. Well, we have got an eating disorder, and that we've had for a very, very early age. And just going back to that and the control and stealing food and stuff like that, how do we get past that? Because you're saying obviously there's natural consequences and stuff like that. So I'm not sure how to go about sort of starting to even think about stuff like that.
Yeah. What age is your child now, Angela?
10.
10. Yeah. I mean, food can be very, very complicated, can't it? And whether there's actual physical eating disorders, which sometimes, you know, the children do have because of effects of alcohol and drugs and things. But there often is a lot of anxiety about food because
anxiety is a huge thing. Very a lot of sensory things as well. Obviously, medically, he's had blood tests and everything, so medically he's okay.
Yeah.
So it has to be what's going on upstairs, sort of thing. So that just it made a connection for me when we were talking about it, because I felt like you were talking directly to us and our situation.
Yes.
So I found that it was like you made a link.
Right. Well, that's great. I think on a sort of general way, I would say try and avoid getting into any control battles about food. We want to reduce anxiety about food. So don't force them to eat things that they don't like, or they've got. I mean, we had a lot of like, we can't have things touching on the plate. So I have one child that wouldn't eat anything that was remotely slimy. We'd only eat like dry things. And, you know, we went with it and let them try things, you know, have things out on the table and encourage them to try things, to feel them, to squidge them, to lick them, touch them and lick the finger. Just keep it very, very low key. Don't get stressed about it, and don't let other people start, you know, trying to bribe them to eat stuff and that. And, you know, if they are stealing food and that sort of thing, you can sort of talk about it, say, well, you know, here's the food, you can just take it when you need it. one of mine used to get up and cook sausages and Yorkshire puddings in the middle of the night. And actually, it was only I realised he was on ADHD medication, and as it wore off, because it's an appetite suppressant, and actually as it wore off, he was hungry, so he was waking up in the middle of the night, and like, but nobody had said that until I mentioned it casually to the doctor. He said, "Oh yeah, that'll be when the drug's wearing off." I'm like, "Well, that would have been useful to know that." But just make sure that the food is there, and say, "Well, look, you can just come and take it. Don't really want you keeping it in the room because it attracts mice and things like that. So you don't need to do that." But if you come across it, you just say, "Oh, that was a bit mouldy, so I've put that." Just keep it low key. Try not to get too stressed about it. I'm just going to look up Sarah Nasher's A to Z of Parenting, which is, I don't want to overload you with lots of books, but I do like Sarah Nasher's A to Z of Therapeutic Parenting. I'll put it in the list, because as it says, it's an A to Z, so you can look up food issues. And you know what, Angela, I'll copy don't tell Sarah Nash, I'll copy the chapter and send it to you, because I see she's got quite a few wee things to say about that. But it is quite a common issue. I had it with one of my kids, and she has kind of grown out of it. Like, she eats lots of things now, whereas she would only eat chicken.
Well, we're like that. The amount of food that he eats is very narrow, so we don't have, like you say, you can't have things touching on the plate. You very often have to put food in separate wee dishes, and his relationship with food is really, really poor. So, as you say, we've been trying to just sort of introduce one thing at a time. And so it's been very, very slow process. But I liked your idea of putting stuff in a wee box in the fridge and just saying you can help yourself to that. So I think I'm maybe going to have a wee shot of that. I'm going to try that and just put different things in the box and see what happens.
That's right. I think if it's that feeling they need to be able to control, they feel they need to control it because other people have had that control. And I say you want to avoid control battles if you can. But I quite like that idea of sneaking new things into the box.
He's stealing the wrong kind of food. So we've actually got a weight problem, an overweight problem, which is other problems and health problems and stuff like that.
Yes.
Quite severe. And so I'm trying to look at ways to get them to sort of think about what we're doing and think about food in a different way. But we'll see, it's been quite challenging, and I didn't want to cause him any more stress. And obviously, I can sort of step outside and see it from both points of view. But as you say, when you're in it, it's difficult. And then you've got the outside interferers who will have their own opinions and bring that to the sort of table as well. And that's it can sometimes be quite messy. So it's been very eye-opening, this lesson today. So I'm going to be taking quite a few tips away, especially the fact that I'd be afraid to drop people that are unhelpful.
Well, it sounds ruthless, doesn't it? But you've got to protect yourself and protect your children. And if they're not the sort of people that you can say, actually, that's not really helpful when you say that, then I'm afraid to let it go a bit. But Angela, also, I'll have a wee think if there's anything else that I've got to hand just about those sorts of food issues, because it is a really common issue, and a lot of it is it's a sensory thing as well as a trauma thing. So in fact, no, I shall write myself a little note. So that's okay. So I will not dash off at the end. So if people want to sort of hold back and have a wee chat with myself or Jennifer at the end, please feel free. But that's just a wee reminder of some of the contact deals for kinship care, but that will be in your handout, so don't worry about writing that down. And also I'll send you, these are books. Now I know that books can be an issue because you haven't got loads of money spend on loads of books. If you have a Kindle or something like that, there's quite often a borrowing facility on some of these things, and these books are available to borrow. So, you know, you can borrow them and read them. But also your social work, if you're in touch with your social worker, they may have a little library of books that they will lend out to you. Or you could say to them, do you know, I really think I need this book. Can you not get that for me? Or can you buy it for your department and lend it to me? If I was going to pick one, I'd go with the A to Z. These ones are for children. This is the one that I took the aeroplane examples from, so it's got pictures. That's why I like it. And this one's a really skinny one, as the name suggests, Therapeutic Parenting in a nutshell. So it's a good quick read, and it's quite a good one to give to other people to explain what you're doing. But if you're not able to, let's say, to get books yourself, see if you can encourage other people to buy them so that you've got access to them, or have a look online. I'll put these ones in as well. These are non-Sarah Naish books, also good. I'll put in a couple of YouTube videos. So that What is Therapeutic Parenting is Sarah Naish, and this is Dan Hughes. But you know, when you're on YouTube and you watch something, other associated stuff comes up. So that might get you into having a look at what's out there. And Dan Siegel's talking about that, the model of the brain that I was talking about as well. So there'll be a few resources in amongst with the slides.